All right. Hey everyone, we are back. I hope you have been having a good summer or winter, depending on your hemisphere. Summer for me up here in Boston, or the Boston area, anyways. So we are back with our live streams. Hope to do these every Thursday again. Thank you if you are joining us. Please feel free to comment. We are live on. Should be live on all the streams right now, so YouTube and Twitch and Twitter or X, and I don't know why we keep saying that now. I think I said YouTube, LinkedIn. Anyways, we're there, so please feel free to comment. So just quickly, if you have never heard of Ampt before, hopefully you've heard of Ampt before, but if you never have, we are basically a developer tool that allows you to quickly build applications and deploy them directly to AWS. We manage the AWS accounts for you, so you don't have to worry about setting anything up. You don't have to worry about writing infrastructure as code. You don't have to worry about managing any of that stuff. It's just done for you. And the coolest thing is we use something we call infrastructure from code, which essentially is the ability to just write application code in JavaScript or TypeScript. And then we take that and we automatically figure out what you need for infrastructure, can optimize that behind the scenes. So some pretty cool things we can do, switch you between Lambda and Fargate, or even Lambda and App Runner if you're running high velocity APIs or any sort of front-end type website that would benefit from using something more steady state like App Runner as opposed to Lambda. So anyways, today we're going to talk about something pretty cool that you can do with Ampt, something that we hope to take quite a bit of the undifferentiated heavy lifting away from you, and that's basically building real-time UIs. So the idea of a real-time UI, you can build full-stack applications on Ampt. Very easy to build anything that generates statically. So if you're using something like React or Vue or static site generators, maybe with some progressive enhancement, things like that, all of that stuff works great on Ampt. If you want to use a full-stack application such as Next.js or Astro or Remix or one of those, where it's actually doing server-side rendering, that's all supported as well. You can mix that with static assets if you need to also. And then if you just want to do backend stuff, so you want to use something like Hono or Express or Fastify or any of those frameworks and those backend frameworks, those API, whatever you want to call them, web frameworks, whatever they're called now. You can use those as well. So it's a pretty flexible system, and the idea is to just make it very, very easy for you to build and for you to build very, very fast without you having to think about all of that backend infrastructure and having to sort of get bogged down with all those decisions. So let's jump into it, and we'll just create a project. So first of all, I created this Hono HTMX demo a while ago. Again, I'm not super interested in the front end piece of this now. I want to show you the back end functionality and focus more on that. So this is just a very simple HTMX demo that uses Hono for the web server or for the HTTP routing framework. So I'm just going to go ahead and clone this, and then we're going to work off of this just to show you some of these different things that we actually want to build and want to add in here. So all right, so basically I'm going to go over to Visual Studio Code here. I'll open up the terminal here, and I'm just in a sandbox directory. This is just a directory that I have a whole bunch of random stuff in, but I'm going to do a git clone here, and we're going to clone this, and let's call it real time UI or something like that. Maybe put a dash there so that feels better. All right, so we are cloning into real-time UI, so let's cd into real-time UI like this. Make sure we got all those files there. All right, and then we'll just go ahead and open this up in VS Code. Okay, so here we go. We have a couple of files here. Just quickly, the majority of the way that Ampt works is that it uses your package.json file really as the only configuration file that we have. And there's not much to this. Essentially, it's a standard package.json file. So you have your index.ts here. That we're using as our main route. So this is our entry point for our app. We do use ESM modules, so we always set the type to module. If you did want to use CommonJS, you can just set that to CommonJS. We have a couple of scripts here, very standard stuff for a package.json. You'll notice we've got this ampt command, which we'll run in a second. We're also just using this run p or this npm run all package just because we want to run some stuff while we're doing development. Again, not super relevant necessarily to what we're building today, but just, powerful stuff that you can do around this. And then we're going to use post CSS with Tailwind, which is just built into this template here. This is, again, all. If you're not a front-end developer, this stuff generally seems somewhat overwhelming, to be honest. But anyway, so we'll use that to generate our Tailwind to do our styles, and then we have this templates program called Fraglets, which is just takes Nunjux templates and converts them into they're JavaScript modules that you can then import and super efficient just to use those to generate front-end HTML and CSS. So let's not worry about that. We'll get that in a second. Dependencies, right now this just uses Ampt data, that Fraglets thing I talked about, and then Hono, and then just some dev dependencies here. This is really just for the Tailwind and some of the dev stuff there. So that's basically it. So there's nothing in here even specifically about Ampt. We're going to do that in just a second, where we're going to go ahead and launch an Ampt application. All right, so let's go ahead and open up our terminal again. We're in this real-time UI directory here, and I'm just going to go ahead and run this Ampt command. So what Ampt will do, and again, you install this using npm i @ampt/cli -g if you want to install that globally. So anyways, I've got a whole bunch of organizations here. You run this app, and of course, if it's already set up, you'd be right into your application. But so I'm going to select an organization. I'm going to hit demo. It's going to ask me what I want to name this, and it should actually name it just. Well, it's probably going to name it Ampt Hono HTMX, so it should ask me. Hold on. So the first thing it's is installing the dependencies, checking if there's updates. Okay, now it's going to ask me if I want to name my app. So let's just call this same thing we had before, which is real-time UI or UIs. Did we call it UI or UIs? I don't remember, but I'm going to call this real-time UI. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and that's going to now generate a new app in Ampt for me. And what this is actually doing is this is grabbing a pre-configured AWS account that is dedicated to me, and it is configuring this now, syncing my code in there, making any changes to it based off of my application code, something we call runtime introspection, and making all those changes so that now my application is running in its own completely isolated AWS sandbox. So here I have this new URL. So if I was to click on this URL and open this here, I'm actually going to get the application that I have built. So this is not showing anything because there's nothing there yet. But if we actually go back and see what we're supposed to do here, we're supposed to install the CLI, and then we're supposed to run Ampt dev. As I showed just quickly in the package.json, this Ampt dev command, this does this run p that runs all these dev commands here, which is CSS and templates. So this just basically generates our CSS for us, and this just runs the template compiler for us. So I can exit this and run Ampt dev, or I can just run dev right here, and this will go ahead and start that dev server for me. And so what this is doing is rendering our templates. We'll look at that in a second, and then essentially allowing us to and generating the CSS, right? And the way that this works too is that this generates into a static directory. So we have the styles. These are the styles that are being dynamically generated for us. If we go back over to this here and refresh, there's still nothing there, but it does tell us we can go ahead and import some dummy data using this import command. This is just another nice feature of Ampt. So if we type in import like this and do that, this will go ahead and import any data that we have in this data.json. And we're going to look at data in a minute because we're going to use that as part of this real-time UI stuff that we're doing. So this just generated or imported a couple of records. So if I refresh this now we see these records show up. This is using HTMX. And so again, this is why we're using the idea of just these templates. So basically we have a base template here. And if you're familiar, I don't know if anybody has seen Nunjux, but Nunjux like this is just a really great templating language based off of Jinja 2, whatever it is. So it's very easy to use, and it's just great because you can just mix, just build HTML, and you don't have to worry about, writing complex, what do they call that? JSX, stuff like that. It just, if you're not a front-end developer, this is really nice to use because it gives you some capabilities, gives you some sort of programming capabilities for your templates, but you don't have to worry about some of the more complex stuff that's there. So we don't really have to get into that much, but essentially what we're doing here is we have this base that, again, just using some basic of the nunjucks stuff. And again, we're using fraglets to wrap it, which just gives us some superpowers around it and makes it easier to do some fragments and some other cool things. So then there's this user template here. And essentially what this user template is it extends the base, which means it uses the base as the layout for it. And then the block content replaces the content before. And then it just has, for loop, the user loop. If it's in an edit mode, show this form. And we are using HTMX. If you're not familiar with HTMX, we'll look at that a little bit because we're going to use that also to manage some WebSockets that we're going to do in a minute. So anyways, basically what this does is this is just loading up. And because we have in this package.json, we're routing you to this index.tsx file. This is the main file that's going to go ahead and load. And everything is going to be routed to this. This is what's going to power our application. So if we go into the index.tx, we'll just go through this quickly, and then we'll get into some of how this other stuff works, and then get into sort of the meat and potatoes of what we're doing. All right, so this is using Hono. If you're not familiar with Hono, it's just a really, really great web standards web framework. Got a whole bunch of cool stuff built in. We have native support built in for those types of fetch-based frameworks. Fraglets is the package I told you about, which is just a wrapper around nunjucks. Data is the Ampt data module, which we're going to use to store and retrieve data. And then there's this fraglets. What we're doing is we're basically creating a new fraglets, which again just reads in those templates for us. A couple cool things we do here is you can either read them directly from the templates directory or whatever directory you create. So this, when it goes to load the base or user's template, it'll load it from the HTML and it'll compile it in real time. And then it caches it, so it's not super inefficient, but again, it does have to load that template and do a compilation, which can affect things a little bit. The other option is to load the pre-compiled version of it. If the pre-compiled version exists, then it will use that, which basically loads it as a ESM module. So it loads very, very fast, and it is a dynamic import, so it only uses it when it needs to. And then, of course, it's cached from there as well. All right, so that's that. Again, not too important. That's more for the front end stuff. We're more concerned about the back end. So let's look at that. All right, so we have app, create a new app, a new Hono app here, and then we're creating a stream, or we're creating a get route just on slash. This is something you can do with fraglets, which is just a sort of a benefit is you can stream fraglets, you can stream back components or the stream back the different blocks, right? So it's cool because then if you have different areas of your application that you want to basically make sure you load something first and they can see, the main part of the screen while other things are sort of suspended and loading in the background. This gives you the capability to do that when you stream them this way. It's not necessary and not necessary even for what we're doing, so we don't have to worry about that, but that's just, again, more of a front end thing in terms of just how it loads the data, but some cool things you can do on the back end with it as well. And then we're just streaming that data back out and encoding it as chunked so that it will it'll send it back in chunks for us automatically. Okay, so that's the first part. That just loads that main frame here. And again, it's loading all of the users. So basically what it's doing in this users thing here is saying, get me all the users, and then return those and map those back. And then what this is doing is this is returning now this user object, which it is sending in, and hopefully this isn't too confusing. We're using the users.html template, which is this here, and then it is returning back to the users block. It is returning back this users this object here that has users in it. So essentially what this is going to do is when it sends this here, block users, for every user in user, it's going to go ahead and loop over that. And again, if it's not in edit mode for that user, then what it's going to do is it's going to pull from that user's array of users and grab the individual user, and then that user has an ID and the name and so forth, and it will generate that and just fill in the template. So that should be pretty straightforward. If it's not, again, I don't want to spend a ton of time on that because I really want to get into some of the things that we're really trying to do here. Anyway, so that streams that back to us, and I think if we wanted to show that quickly, let me save this here. I don't know what, I just did the precompiled thing. So a couple things too, just to remember, the way that Ampt works is when you make a change here, it gets synced instantaneously to your developer sandbox. So if I come back over here and refresh, I'm going to go ahead and see, I should have done a darker background on this because it's washing out my face here. So this goes ahead and loads this stuff here. If I wanted to make a change, like I wanted to go into this users template, and before this section here, maybe I just want to go ahead and put in, an H2 and say users. And then because this is using Tailwind, we are going to need to put some sort of style. So I'll say font, let's say large, extra large. It's text, sorry. Couldn't remember how to do this. Text XL, like that, and do font bold, like that. Okay, so you'll notice that it says last synced a minute ago down here. So as soon as I save this, if we watch this here, this will go ahead and say last synced just now. There was a little flash there. And essentially what that did is it just synced it up to the server or to the developer sandbox for me. So now I can see that this change happens immediately, and I can see that users show up. So just a couple quick things. Again, this is HTMX, which just makes things super easy to build these front-end items or front-end interfaces. Again, maybe you're not a huge fan of HTMX. You'd rather use Next or something else. Next, whatever, do it. It's you can do whatever you want. I just like using HTMX because it makes things pretty simple. So again, HTMX works, you hit edit right here. What this has done, if we look back at the code here, this is basically saying if you, if you hit edit next to the item here, which is this button right here, it just calls the /user ID /edit, and it just does a get to it, and essentially what it does, it will swap out the outer HTML for us. So what that essentially is that's going to go ahead and call this user ID /edit endpoint, and in our index here, we have this endpoint user ID /edit, and what this will do is it'll pull that user ID from the param there. It'll get the user's information, and then it will go ahead and render just the fragment, the star user or the pound user fragment, nice star user, pound user fragment, with the user information and the fact that it says edit's true. And so what that does is this will call this user template, but then it will look for just this block user here. And so not users, but block user, right? And so then if it's in this edit mode, it knows to show it in the edit mode here, which essentially is what this is doing, is saying edit true. So it's telling us so return this div right here, which basically is giving us back where is it? If edit, sorry, no, this one here. So it's just returning this block back to us like this. And that's what gives us this this box here, right? So now I can change this John Doe 123. I hit save, and again, very similar, right? So this is actually sending a post to, or a put to /users/123. So if we go here, we can see that we have a put to the user ID, and essentially what it does is it will go ahead and set the data and then re-render it for us with the updated data, and then output that, and then HTMX just swaps that simple part of that. Okay. That was a lot, probably more than we needed to go through. We're 20 minutes in, but now let's get to sort of the crux of what we want to be able to do. Okay, so let's say that we just use this user manager as a, we'll just use it as a template for what we want to do to make it a little bit easier. All right, so one of the things that we want to try to do is to make these UIs interactive and real time, not interactive, but real time. Right? We want to make sure that while we're sitting here and something is happening in the background, maybe users are signing up, maybe other information is changing, whatever it is, we want to be alerted of this somehow within this UI. And this could be something too, like maybe every time some graph changes, we want to refresh a graph, and we could use this to do dashboards if we wanted to build dashboards with it. But let's take an approach where we'll worry less about the editing here and more about just being able to see things as they change. And probably a good way or a good thing to, a good idea to think about, or a good use case for this might be something like notifications, because notifications seems to be a common thing that we see, whether we're on X or on LinkedIn or any other service, or we're in a SaaS, interface and some sort of SaaS UI, and we see, a notification comes in that somebody new is signed up or whatever it is, right? Some sort of notification. So we want to be able to do that. So the best way to do that, obviously, is WebSockets. WebSockets have become the standard to do those sort of things, and there's been a lot of services that have started to build WebSocket capabilities in the future. One of the things I do want to mention is that if you're not familiar with Momento, I think it's Momento. I don't know. It's either Go Momento or Momento HQ. I think it's Momento HQ. Let's hope this is the right one. GoMomento.com. Momento HQ gets you there. So Momento HQ or GoMomento.com, which is Momento, has a really cool service that they just launched. Yes, we'll accept those, called Topics. And essentially Topics is their WebSockets, right? And it makes it very, very easy, and you can do all kinds of cool things with them, and they're great. It's basically a serverless event bus, as they call it. It scales really well. We're going to talk about more of this in the future, because there's a lot of cool things that you can build with this. It's got very, very good pricing in terms of that. But sometimes, in terms of what you can do with Ampt and what you can do just sort of in your own environment without necessarily using a third-party service, which again, for caching and for those, it is definitely something to look at, because they are very, very cool. But we actually have the capability to do that just built into our application that we deploy to Ampt. And so if we go to the docs and we go over here to WebSockets, we basically have a built-in WebSocket manager. It uses API gateways, WebSockets. A couple things in terms of the WebSockets protocol. If you're thinking like, well, how do I do WebSockets on AWS? How do I do them serverlessly? Well, there's a couple different ways. So one is API gateway. That is sort of the, that was launched a while ago. It's very, very cool, works very, very well, gives you bi-directional WebSocket functionality. So you can respond to, you can send messages back on a WebSocket, which is also kind of cool. Like you have that one connection open and you don't necessarily have to do HTTP events to change stuff. The other option is to use AppSync. AppSync has a subscription model using GraphQL. That works really, really well. That is that only works in one direction though. So essentially, you can subscribe to a WebSocket, which will send requests to you. You cannot send requests back to that. You have to post them to an HTTP endpoint, which again works perfectly fine. Not a big deal. What's nice about the GraphQL ones or the AppSync ones is that they do broadcast. So if you have thousands of people that are following a particular topic or whatever it is, you can go ahead and send one message and everybody will get that. You don't have to go through every connection and send a separate message to every connection like you have to do with API Gateway, which is a little bit frustrating. So depending on what your use case is, there's different ways to do that. If it's a lot of one-to-one type things or very small groups that are doing it, then the WebSockets with API Gateway work just fine. The other thing is IoT, but if you use IoT, I think you have to use the MQTT protocol, which is different than the WebSocket protocol, which means when you connect from your web browser or from a different device, you would have to use that different protocol in order to connect. It wouldn't be the standard WebSocket stuff. So anyways, programming is all about choices, right? And all about trade-offs. So you got to figure out what those trade-offs are and what you need to do. So I do like the WebSockets through API Gateway. They're very stable. It's very cool functionality. And again, even if you are doing a broadcast, you just need to do some looping, and as long as it's not thousands and thousands and thousands of users that are connected to a single topic, it's not too bad. So anyway, so let's look at that. So WebSockets are built in. They're very, very easy to use with Ampt. I'm gonna make this a little bigger so we can see some of these things. And so essentially what you just need to do is you import the WS module or a WS interface from the Ampt SDK. And then we give you 3 separate sort of handlers that you can use. One is the connected, one is disconnected, and one is message, which gives you the capabilities to interact based off those different things. All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna copy this. I guess I could just hit copy code over here, and we will go back to our application, and I'm gonna paste this up at the top just so I have the import. And then I'm going to move these things here down to the bottom. By the way, this socket connection is just a type declaration. So if you are using TypeScript and you want to get the information on the actual socket connection or the types on the socket connection, you can do that. Okay, so we just said WS, we just created these things, and I'm just going to do some logs here so we can see this. We'll say it's connected, and if we look at that connection, the connection item or the value that we pass in here, this has a couple of bits of information on it, including connection ID. It is connected. There's some other things, but we're just going to go ahead and use connection ID for now because that's going to go ahead and give us it's going to give us the connection ID, the unique ID of the connection that's generated by API Gateway when we connect. So we'll do that. And then let's go ahead and copy this, and we're going to do this for the disconnect, and we're just going to say disconnected here, just give it some logging. And then the connection will do the connection ID. And then the other thing that you will have here as well is this reason. So let's go ahead and use this reason so that we can see or show the reason, see what it is there. And then we want to go ahead and do the same thing here, and we'll say message. This will give us the connection ID, and then, we can see what the data is. One thing that is cool is that if you do send in a JSON formatted message into the system, we'll automatically parse it for you. So it'll just go ahead and spit back as data. So if it's a string, you'll get string. If it's JSON, it'll give you JSON. Okay, I'm going to hit save. And just like that, we have created a WebSocket server that's all set for us to start using. Okay. There's a couple different ways we can connect to WebSockets. If we look here and go down to connections from a client, you can see that we could use the WS cat if we wanted to, and do this from our browser. Do this from our terminal. We can certainly do that. And again, all you have to do is just use this WSS protocol, and you will actually let's just do that just for fun. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this like that. We'll go back to our terminal. We'll open up a new one. We'll type that in, and then we will grab our URL over here so that we have it. So we just want this part of the URL and paste this in. Oops, I think I'm missing so 2 slashes. That, hit enter, and oh, I don't have WSCat installed. All right, never mind. We don't need to do that anyways because we're going to show. We'll do it from the browser, and it'll be a little bit easier. Okay, so if we want to connect to a WebSocket from a browser, we're using HTMX, so HTMX actually gives us a very, very handy way to do this. One thing is that we are using the older version of HTMX, which is, I think, 1.9, I think is what we have in our base template here. So let's go ahead and just upgrade this to 2.01. And then if we come in here and we want to do WebSockets, I already searched for it apparently. Search for WebSockets, that didn't work. There we go. We need to use the WebSockets extension. So the WebSockets extension just uses this bit of code right here. Also, again, we are using the CDN versions of these. Production-wise, I wouldn't do that. The benefits you get from of using a CDN, if that goes down or gets compromised, there's just too many things. So these are pretty easy to just build a quick script that'll copy them down and save them into your static directory, and then you can reference them locally. So you don't even have to rebuild them or anything like that. It's pretty easy to do. All right, so we created this. And if we look at the WebSocket extension, essentially what this is saying we need to do is we need to, let's paste it in, and then we can look at it. So I'm going to use this user screen, by the way, for now, because we're going to do it all on this user screen. But then we'll start making it a little more fancy afterwards. So all you have to do here is just use hxext, and we'll call the WebSockets extension, which is WS, and then what we want to connect to. So we're just going to connect to / right? Because everything just happens at /, and that's the main way that works right now. Okay, and then there's this ID notifications, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw a class in here, and I'm going to say border. Let's do red 500, and we'll do padding of 5 or 3. Yeah, 3 is better. Okay, so that way we'll just have a little bit of space there. And then there's this chat room thing here. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy in just so we can see these things, because otherwise, I love Tailwind, but it does remove some basic formatting for us. So let's just do this one in blue, because we're going to just be all these crazy colors. And then our form. So this is the other thing that's really cool, is you basically just create a form, you give it an ID. We can call this, WS form, whatever it is. And then this WS send basically tells it that when this form is submitted, go ahead and send the information in. So this has an input, and I'm just going to call this, I'll just call this message. And let's add a class to this as well so that we can see this. So class border, and let's just do slate 500 with a padding of 3. Sure, that's going to look terrible, but that's fine. Okay, so then we go back to our user manager here. We will refresh, and we should see a bunch of ugly stuff that shows up down here. And why are we not seeing these things here? We should. We are in dev mode, right? Yeah. Just curious to see why those didn't load. Pardon me, just trying to figure out why. Oh, you know what I bet you it is? Let me just double check something. Tailwind config, TSX template. Yeah, should pick up all that. Interesting why it didn't. Post CSS, that should be watching. Don't know why my CSS isn't reloading, but did I do something wrong here? I don't know why those styles aren't loading. I'm sure it's something dumb, but CSS, dot CSS to static CSS styles, post CSS main to styles. Should be working. I don't know. Users. Okay, well, that's not working right now for some reason. Border slate. Just try something. Sorry, I tend to get hung up on these things. Text green 500. Save that. Oh, that worked. So why are these not working? I don't know. Okay, well, anyways, maybe we'll figure that out later. But let's just worry more about the WebSocket stuff. So if we look over here, let's move that, I'll refresh. So here we have our WebSocket that is connected to Fearless Deploy, which is just the name of our URL, and then our messages here. So headers are all connected, messages. And then if we look at our code over here, or our real-time logs, which, by the way, I forgot to mention, these are real-time logs from your application. So this is saying it's connected, and this is the ID that it's giving us. And because of you're refreshing in some of those things, it'll disconnect, reconnect, and so forth. So here is our connection ID right now. And if we were to go ahead and actually send a message here, which I believe we can just do by, we can send a message here, right? Hold on, headers, yeah, send. Wait, how do we send a message? I know I just did this. Thought we could send a message, right? Oh, I'm not thinking straight here. This is our message here. So if we go ahead and type in test and hit send, then this should send a message to the server for us. Let me see if I got it. Sorry, brain's not working today. There we go. Okay, so here we see that a message was received. The message was test. It gives us some headers that just tell us, hey, this came from HTMX, tells us what the trigger was, which is this WS form, the target, the current URL that it was sent from, and so forth. So it gives us a bunch of information that we can then use in order to do some pretty cool things on the back end. Okay, all right, so sorry, let me get a little, let's see, okay, so, all right, so now I really am bothered though by this border not working here, and I don't know why it is not. Let me just check something quickly. We are using styles, right? User, class, div notifications, class, border. Right? These are all the correct things here. Just curious. Why some things are picked up and some are not. Oh. Sorry, everyone. Brain not working. All right, you gotta tell it that it needs a border first, and then we can tell it the color of the border. I'm sure somebody picked up on this. Same thing here, border. Good old front end. Refresh. Okay, now we have these ugly borders in place. Nice. Okay. All right, I'm just going to add margin bottom of 2 to each one of these to just give us some space. Margin bottom 2. And that one we don't need to worry about. Okay, come over here. And this is one of the things that I do love about Tailwind is that if we wanted to do something like make these rounded, then we can just say rounded. And then suddenly our ugly UIs slowly become less ugly. So now we'll get these nice little rounded areas there. Okay, so this is that little chat room area. So this here is the input that we have, and essentially this is just the message form, and I don't know what that, oh, actually, okay, that's not, sorry, I've seen a markup there, and it has nothing to do with what's actually there. Okay, so here's where we can then send that information again, and that will send that to the server for us. So again, hello world, enter that, and again, it's not disappearing. This is UI stuff that you would generally do, but this should have. I don't know why I'm not seeing anything showing there, because I am in fact sending those messages, and we are seeing those messages come through here, hello world, and so forth. Okay, so let's do this. Let's say once we get a message, let's respond back just so that we have something that we show. Okay, so when we get a message here, we want to go ahead and do a connection dot send. So we can say like hello from server. So we'll just do that one first. So hello 1 2 3 enter. So that sends, and I don't know why this is saying filtering regex. I don't want to filter receive headers. Why am I not seeing my messages? Try refreshing this just for the heck of it. Okay, so now I'm seeing it. I don't know why I wasn't seeing it before. Okay, so here's our fresh one here. So I'm going to send in test 1 2 3. I'll hit enter. We'll see that was sent, and then we get this hello from server back. Okay. A hello from server. Now again, we could write a bunch of JavaScript that says, hey, when we get a message back, let's do that. It actually works really, really easily in HTMX, where with HTMX, all we actually have to do is just return some HTML with an HX swap, out of bounds swap, and that will allow us to do some pretty cool things. So I'm gonna start with this, and we're gonna say, I'm going to go ahead and do notifications. Now this says out of OOB, which is out of bounds swap. This says before end, which means this would do like it would keep appending it. We just want this to go ahead and say true for now, which will just go ahead and swap something out. And then what I'm going to do is within here, this makes it a little cleaner. I'm just going to go ahead and do a math.random like this. Just so we'll see a different value when that refreshes. Okay, so just like that, we've now don't have to do anything special, hit 4, and this should give us a random value. If I send another message, that value is going to change. Another message, that value is going to change. So I realize I haven't used my drawings yet. So this is just, this value right here, watch that value. We submit it, that changes, we submit it, it changes, and so forth. And then we should see a whole bunch of these things coming back and forth. So what's very cool about the way that these out-of-bounds swaps work is we can actually switch out a bunch of different things. So if we wanted to, we could go ahead and say, look, let's go ahead and switch out this notification thing here. And I'm just gonna change, well, we'll leave that as math.random for now. And so this is completely, by the way, swapping out the notifications thing itself. So that's one way. So let me just double check, because I think we can do, let's see, will be swapped using the extension. We don't care about that. So the out-of-band swaps, you have the option of true or any valid HX swap value. Okay, so we could go ahead and change this to inner HTML like this. And then if we come back here and refresh and then type in test, hit enter, this will just change the inner contents of it as opposed to replacing the whole object. So you get a bunch of different options, which is pretty cool. The other thing that we could do here as well is we can send back multiple things. So if we also wanted to send back, for example, I'll set this just as a separate set of backticks here. If we wanted to take, what is it? It is the chat room here, right? So if we wanted to go ahead and take ID chat room, we'll throw this in here. We'll do div ID chat room, and learn how to type would be good, /div or div like this. And then we can use this here, HTMX swap OOB, and then we'll say before, or is on before end? I think it's on before end. Hold on, no, just before end, right? So we'll do before end like this. And then what this will do is this will add whatever we want into, this will append this within that chat room ID. So let's go ahead and just put in whatever the, let's see, data.message was, like this. Say that doesn't like that. So message does not exist on type string. Object does not. Okay, so that's All right, that's just a, yeah, it's there. So let's go ahead and go back here. And then if I was to type in hello, hello from Ampt, like this, and hit, that's going to go ahead and append this here like that. Now, again, we could do something to get rid of that first one if we wanted to as well. But essentially, anything I type now, 1, 2, 3, this will keep appending it. Now, we are getting a message back from the server that's not showing there. And so we could, this message that we are sending back, if we had some other message that we wanted to include in it, we could include some other text in there, whatever was being responded or sent back. All right, so that's cool. It's interactive. It's real time in the sense that we now have this WebSocket open. We're really not doing anything with the WebSocket, so we want to go ahead and actually do something when something happens with WebSocket. Okay, so first of all, one of the things I said that we need to be able to do is we want to be able to send a message to the customer or to the client, the connected client, after the fact, right? So when we get a message from the customer or from the client, it gives us that connection ID, but we don't save that. We're not saving that anywhere, and that we need to do. So what I'm going to do here is when the customer or when the client connects, I'm going to do a, and I'll return this as a variable so that we have it, but I'll just say like saved connection con. Let's do that, and we'll do an await data.set. And then what we essentially want to do is create a list of open connections so that we have those open connections. Now, there's a couple different ways that you can do this. One is it could be very specific to this user, or it could be specific to a larger group or whatever it's going to be. Okay, but basically, if we, for the purpose of this, we're not worrying about an individual user connecting. We'll just assume that there's only one user connecting. But this could easily be done by basically using some sort of dynamic user ID here, that we get from a cookie or from some other way, from an authorization header or something else that is giving us that information. We're not going to worry about that right yet. We're just going to basically say, look, we want to make sure we can get back a list of all open connections, and then we're going to go ahead and set it as the connections.connection ID. And what this is essentially going to do is this is going to tell the system. Also, I just need to make sure that this is async function like this, so we can use await. So this is going to take this connections and then whatever the connection ID is, and it's going to go ahead and set a value in the database that gives us this information. We're not going to set any other information with this connection, so I'm just going to go ahead and set it as a blank object for now. But there's a bunch of other ways that we could do this stuff. And then what this should do is we will go ahead and actually log this as connected, and we'll log out the saved con. I'm going to call it save connection, and there's no reason to keep it short, and I like to be explicit anyway, so call it save connection. All right, so this will save that connection for us. Now, the other thing we want to do is when somebody disconnects, we want to make sure that we disconnect the connection, right? So I'm going to go over here and say that, and when somebody disconnects, I'm going to go ahead and async this, and we're going to say remove like this. So if that remove exists, then it's going to go ahead, or if this connection exists, it's going to go ahead and remove them. We don't need this because we're only removing it from the key. And this will go ahead and disconnect us and remove that from the database so that that's not there. So what's good about this is that if we have multiple customers that connect at the same time, or there's, things get disconnected all the time with WebSockets, it happens. When there's a reconnection, we'll always have that active connection going for us. So we'll know what that is. And then when we get a message in, we're not going to worry about this just yet, but we want to be able to send messages as well. So what's cool about the way that the WebSocket functionality works here in Ampt is that if you want to send a message, you can either use this connection.send, or you can use this ws.send by providing a connection ID. So if you go into ws.send with the connection ID, then you can go ahead and send the message that way. And we can also send that out of, outside of the WebSocket connection itself, which means we can just tell the system to go ahead and send a WebSocket message for us. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. We also have this is connected thing that you can test to make sure that the actual connection is connected as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this ws.send. Well, first of all, here let's go ahead and show. Let's go ahead and show something. I'm going to open. Click open here, and what open will do is this will just open up the Ampt dashboard for me to my particular app that I'm working with. And so right now I'm using real-time UI. I am using my Jeremy environment, which is a sandbox. And if I go into data here and I do get all items, we will see that I have some of those users that we had in before, but I also have this connections here. And if I actually wanted to go and just search for connections star like this, I should be able to, oops, there we go, query item by key, and this will give me all those active connections. So what's interesting about this is, let me move this to a new window like that. Right? So I've got this connection. If I was to refresh this, then we should see that changed because it's now a different connection. And if I were to go over here and I'm going to copy this and I'm going to add open another version of this, then what should happen over here is now I should see that I have those two connections. So that's just what we're doing. We're just keeping track of these connections in DynamoDB. My data is just an interface with DynamoDB. So it gives us some capabilities. So now we know where all the open connections are. And then what's cool about having these open connections is that let's say that we were to send a message. And so again, this will just do this quickly, I guess. It's not that big of a deal. Is when we want to go ahead and send a message, I'm not going to worry about this right now. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say when a new message comes in, and again, we could do all kinds of stuff to say, make sure that it's actually a message and blah, 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 whatever. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get a list. So I'm going to say, oops, I think I can type here. I'm going to do const, and I'm going to say connections like this, and I'm going to do await data.get. like this, and I'm going to get all my connections, and I do need to make this a async like that. All right, so now I do data.get, which is giving me an error for some reason. String object, oh, because I overwrote data here. So let's call this, I'll just call this event. How about that? If we can spell. All right, so this is now my actual data. Okay, so data.get connections. I'm going to get a list of all the connections. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and log this just so we can see what will actually come back. So we'll just say connections. And it is going to return back, by the way, a connections.item or items that will give us some information. So I'm going to hit save here. I will open this up a little bit, and then I want to go over to this, and we'll go into this one. Oops. Sorry, I'm trying to show everyone what I'm trying to show you. I want it to be this and this. Okay, so now when I send a message here, I'll just type in test. So this will go ahead and now give me these two connections. And this is giving me these connections, these keys. So actually one of the things that we could do, if we wanted to make this a little bit easier on ourselves, is when we save this connection, why don't we go ahead and save the connection ID as connection ID like that. So I'm going to refresh this, and I'm going to refresh this, and magically what this should do, I'll clear that out, is that if we were to send a message now, test, So this will give us the key, but then this will give us a value and give us that connection ID. That's the way we don't have to parse this out there. Okay, so now in here, we're going to have this list of connections. And what we want to do is, I'll just make this a little bit simpler. We will go ahead and let's see, const con in connections dot items. All right, this should go ahead and give us each one of those connections. And then this is going to just be con dot value and dot connection ID. Not value of, that's not right. Just dot value. Okay. And this, by the way, is just going to give us a weird, these are just some TypeScript errors that you can figure out. But it's going to, cannot read property of undefined. Okay, so this should be for con, how about we change that to something that actually works? Pardon my lack of, there we go. Okay. Got the two connections that we need. All right, so now we can use that ws.send, right? So I'm going to do ws.send. We're going to use the connection ID. And again, this con.value, again, just TypeScript errors. And then what we can do is if we look at our WebSockets, when we send messages, so it's just whatever it is that we want to send, and then you can do this throw if not connected, if false, but we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to try to send it anyways. So we're going to send that connection ID, and then we're going to send something with that. So the message that we want to send is going to be what we were sending here. So we want to go ahead and grab this, and we want to send a chat room. Oops. There you go. So we want to go ahead and use data.message. Again, these are TypeScript errors. You can better type this than I would. Basically, we're going to send it, and it's going to go ahead and give us the data.message, and it should do the out of band swap or the before end swap for us. And this should do this to both of the clients, assuming that this works. All right. So we're going to come back over to this here. Let's close this down. All right, let's refresh and I'll separate this out into a new window like this. So we should have two completely separate clients running. So now if I was to type in hello from one client and send this, I will get undefined. Cool. All right, it's because it's not called data. It is called, we changed it, right? What did we change it to? Event. So this should be event.message. Okay, let's go ahead and refresh this and refresh this. All right, so now we say hello from client one, and we'll get that in both. And then over here, if we say hello from client two and send that, we'll get that from both. Okay, so now we are maintaining this. Right now we basically have built the chat room, but the cool thing is that now we can send out information independently, right? And we don't have to worry about knowing the connection ahead of time. We just want to send it to every connection that that is there. So this is cool. So right, so now what we would want to be able to do is potentially send some sort of notification or something like that, based off of some other action that happens in the system. Okay, so let's see if we can do this quick and dirty just for fun. All right, so the first thing that we want to do is when we load this notifications thing, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a value here and just call this notifications like this, just so that we can pass a value in here. I'm going to go back here, and when the actual thing runs itself. Let's see if I can find where we are back up here. Sorry, it's part of the problem with having a small screen. We're trying to share large enough for you to see. Okay, so when this runs here, so we're going to run this user command in the user section. But the other thing we want to do is we actually want to be able to provide some information on the notifications. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const notifications, which doesn't exist, by the way, not yet, but we're going to await, and we're going to do a data.get, and we're going to call it notification star. So we'll just do that for now, and and that way there's much better ways that we can do this. And again, if we wanted to have this for a specific user, right, you would have like user ID here and then like use a pound or something like that. But we're doing quick and dirty just to show the capabilities. All right, so we're going to do this get notifications here. And actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to do this. I'm going to do get notifications like this. And then what I'm going to do is pass into here. I'm going to say notifications is going to equal notifications dot count or 0 like that. Notifications is of type unknown. Okay. Shouldn't have used TypeScript here because I don't want to deal with all those things there. All right, so I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to come over here, and again, I'm going to shut this one down because we don't need both of them running. Let me refresh this, get an internal server error. Perfect. Why? What did I do wrong? I'm sure I did something wrong. Try it again. Notifications count should be 0. Wait, that should all be fine. What did I do? Okay, here we go. Cannot read properties of undefined count. Yes, good point. All right, so notifications. So let's do this. We'll do notifications, await data notifications, or just bring back nothing. How about that? And then we refresh this. Okay, so now we'll get a 0, right? So the 0 notifications, perfect. Okay, and again, we could do some other fancy things if we wanted to. And one thing, by the way, you'll see connections when you're in dev mode, they'll disconnect and reconnect and disconnect and reconnect just because when you refresh and we make some changes to the configurations behind the scenes automatically for you, some of that stuff happens. All right, it's already noon, so I want to try to get this done. Sorry, it's an hour past. It's probably not noon for a lot of you. Okay, so anyway, so now we've got the 0 here. So what we want to do is every time we refresh this, it should give us our current notification count. Now, we don't have a notification count in here, so it's not giving us any information. So we could create this dynamically if we wanted to, or if we went in here and we created a new value, we just called it, or new data item, we'll call this notifications. And then I'm going to go ahead and put in count, and I'm just going to say that this is 5. And this needs to be valid. JSON like that, so save. Okay, so now I've created this, a new value here called notifications, which means when we're over here and we refresh, this should give us that value of 5. Okay, perfect, that's what we want. All right, now what we want to do though is we want this notification number to go up somehow, right? And we want that to increase, and then we want to make sure that when the notification changes, that it's going to update this for our service. Okay, so a couple cool things we can do. I'm going to go ahead and add a data listener that says data.on, and it's going to be when the value is updated, and the updated value that we're going to look for is when it is in fact notifications. This is going to, I'm just going to call this event, any is fine. All right, and close that. And then what this will do is if we log out, and we'll call this update notifications, the event, anytime that notification changes, we're going to go ahead and get this value to, or get this to trigger for us. So if I was to jump over to our data manager again, which is over here, and I'm just going to do get all items like this. Here's our notifications. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change this to 6, and I'm going to hit save. And then what this will do is here we'll get this updated, right? That says this is what it is now, count equals 6. The previous value was 5. Okay, so what I want to have happen is when this notification number changes, I want to update my UI and let the UI know that a value has changed. So I'm going to copy this exact bit of code that we used in the last section here so that we could sort of manage that chat interface. I'm going to go ahead and load all my connections, and I'm going to get my connection ID, the whole deal, and then I want to update my notifications. So I have this value here that I can copy this, or this that we used before. This is going to send down the notifications. Is going to do an inner HTML swap, and I want to swap this with the value of the the new value that I have. So here I'm looking at item.value.count. So in here I will say, give me the event.item.value.count like this. And that's going to give me that new number. So now if I come over here and I refresh, we're going to have 6 because we know that there were 6 there. But I'm going to go ahead and see if we can squeeze this in. So now that we've got that all set up, if I were to go in and this notification number was to change, so now suddenly we have 8 notifications, I hit save, that should go ahead and run the background and then automatically update my UI. And again, not that this is super important, but if we were to create another open copy of this here, again, we should have, that's not a word, this should be sending the data to both of those different things. And if I was to go in here, go into my notifications, let's see how small I can make this, not very small, I guess. I'm gonna update this to 3 and move this down. So 8 and 8, I click save, that hits, and both of those things update. So now, this is just really powerful. And again, we just scratched the surface. There's so much you can do with this stuff, but the fact that it's all sort of managed for you is just a really nice, sort of a nice thing. And when you got data built in, you've got all these things interacting with one another. Again, there's ways we could segment the data so different clients would get different data and so forth. But it is just really powerful to have this all, in your hands, and you don't have to do much in order to make this work. If you're more of a TypeScript expert and you can, fix these things, and you certainly can, feel free to fix some of these TypeScript errors. And of course, there's plenty of ways, beyond HTMX. I'm just using HTMX because it's super easy to do. I'm a big fan of how that works. Obviously, if you did want to use, WebSockets, the WebSockets that are created by Ampt, by the way, are standard WebSockets, right? So if you want to connect from a client, you can use, this is basic. This is the basic way in which you would connect, from your standard web web browser. Right, okay. So anyways, very cool stuff. Like I said, we kind of scratched the surface. You can send information back and forth over these WebSockets, can broadcast it to multiple ones. You need to manage those connections yourself, but pretty cool stuff. So anyways, I hope you found that interesting, and maybe give you some ideas of some cool things that you can build with it. Do check out Ampt. Sign up. It is that's just going to sign me in there, so that's okay. There is a free tier that you can use, as sort of what we call our preview tier. You can go in and start building with it and start experiencing it. And then if you're interested in doing something serious with it, or even just a side project, it's pretty inexpensive to use, and would love to get your feedback. We're always trying to make this better. Key thing here is, look, we want you to be able to build without having to think too much about the underlying infrastructure. And the last thing I'll say before I let you all go is that the premise that we're trying to get here is, picking primitives, and am I using a Lambda function? Am I using App Runner? Am I using ECS cluster or Fargate containers, or what am I doing? There's a lot of decisions you need to make there. What kind of queues am I using? Am I using SNS? Am I using Event Bridge? Am I using some of these other things? A lot of decisions, a lot of cost optimizations that can be made. Lots of things that you can do there. We're trying to remove a lot of that decision making for you and just give you the best practices built in. So if you need to build something and you want to build something stable and quick and be able to maintain it without having to pin it to specific primitives and how that kind of runs, gives you a bit of portability, as different services change and upgrade. That's part of the philosophy here that we have at Ampt. So anyways, give it a try. Tell us what you think. If we're missing stuff in the docs, you want to see more sample applications, we'd love to know. And please join us on Discord. We got a pretty good Discord community going with lots of people sharing information and stuff like that. So anyways, like I said, I hope that you have found this useful, and I look forward to seeing you next week.